Alright, today we are going to learn how to cut someone out of the background and place them into a new background. So I'm going to select a photo that I want. I'm going to cut myself out. So I'm just going to be in Lightroom, just go to Edit In, and go to Edit in Photoshop, which I'm going to do. Brings it up in Photoshop. Now there's multiple ways to cut people out of the background. We are going to learn about using two different tools today. The first one would be the Quick Selection tool, which is right here. When you click and hold this down, you have the magic wand and the Quick Selection. We want Quick Selection. All right. Now with the Quick Selection tool, when we use that, we want to select myself as such. I'm going to select my whole self, but basically what you just want to do is you want to click and drag down. Now, before we go into the whole thing, I'm going to deselect here. I'm going to show you that we have different options up here on our toolbar. So once I've selected one to select with, I have this one, which is just single selection. So if I went to select something, right, and I had this still on, if I selected somebody else, the first selection would go away. So I want to keep it on additive. This means that if I select something and I select some more and I select some more, it just adds to it as I go. Okay. The next one would be subtract. So if I click on subtract, I can take away parts of it. Right. So with those, let's deselect. Let's go select me. I keep it on additive because there's a shortcut for subtracting, but we'll get back to that in just a second. So let's go over here, and I'm just going to start at the top of my hat, and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag. Okay. Now, the bigger my brush is, the more it selects automatically, and sometimes it'll select outside of what you want to do. So please make sure that I try to use a smaller brush, just so it makes less mistakes. And I can go back in and kind of add things in here. You can see that the back of the beanie is not quite doing it, so I can just kind of click on that edge. And there's a little bit up here that's too much and didn't get, so I'm going to click on the edge right here to add this stuff. I'm going to go back and subtract everything later. So you can see there's a little bit right there that I didn't want, so we'll come back to that. So I'm just going to click and drag and kind of select myself. I've got this extra over here, but let's come back to that. So we'll start with the big part. We'll go to the little part. So as of right now, I'm still on additive. I still have the plus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down my option key, and that goes to negative. So I can subtract now as I go. Same properties still work. Size of the brush does matter, so the bigger ones are going to select a little bit more. Let's go back up to this. Now if I go up to this and I subtract, sometimes it's not going to do exactly what it is that I want. As you can see, here, oops, a little bit too much, wrong way, that it's just not doing a very good job right here. So I'm going to use a different tool. I'm going to use the Lasso tool. Now the Lasso tool is the one that right here, right above the Quick Selection tool. So if I click on the Lasso tool, I have a lot of different options here. They all do basically the same thing. Magnetic's a little bit special, but we're going to use our Lasso tool. Lasso tool is just a free form type of one. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm not going to use my Lasso tool to add to this. I'm going to subtract the same way I did with my Quick Selection, where I just hold down the option key, and I'm just going to draw along here best that I can. Now, it doesn't have to be necessarily perfect, because there's another way to switch it later, but you have to make a circle and come back to your beginning area, right? And you can see there's still some here that I want, so I still have additive on, so I'm just going to kind of draw along the edge here and add these little parts in so I get a little bit cleaner edge with all that white. Okay, and I go along, I could go in here and I could add some of this so that you get a little bit of the fuzz. But you can go around and just kind of use that tool to kind of add to that area. Now there was one section on here I'm going to show you. Let's just do this, do this. It's right here, the comb symbol. It didn't highlight that. So if I just encircle it like this, it adds it to this whole selection. Okay? So once you have used your Quick Selection, which should be most of it, and then your Lasso tool, after that, what we're going to do is we're going to come down here to our layer mask. So I'm going to zoom out so you can see what happens when I do that. So I click on my layer mask, it does exactly that. Now, if I look over here, I have my background copy, my background layer, I should say, and then I have a layer mask right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and look at this, and I'm going to look at some of these edges. And you see, like right here, I'm not a big fan of this. So I can unselect some of that. As long as my layer mask is on, I'm just going to go to my brush, okay, and make sure that right now I have white and black. So if I draw with white, it's just going to put stuff back that it was already there. If I go with black, then it just, takes stuff out. Same concept that we used with Color Splash. So I'm just going to zoom in to a couple of these edges, especially like right here. I need to add some back in here. So I'm going to push X as my shortcut to switch between the black and the white right here. Make sure I'm on white so I can add some of this beanie back in. There's that the little logo for Louisville got cut out when I did my quick selection. Now even if I go past the edge like this, and I obviously don't want that, I can just switch to X. Switch the X and it goes to black over here instead of white, and it'll erase. Okay? And so you can touch up your selection after you've done your layer mask if you don't like exactly what it is that you like. Okay? So I would go back in and clean this up a little bit right here. Do this, kind of select it. Okay? Now let's zoom back out. So now I have my selection right here. Pretty easy the next spot. We've done this a few times. I'm going to go to Chrome and I'm going to find a place. Let's say Switzerland. Let's use Switzerland. Let's say I want to go to Switzerland. So let's move this down so that I can see both. I literally am just going to drag this to here. It's going to say, are you sure? It's got different space. Yes, it's fine. I'll just mess with it. Now it's really tiny and that's okay. I'm just going to push Command T for my transform. I'm going to kind of move the whole thing over here a little bit. Now again, we need to make sure that we're holding down Shift and only pulling from the corners. That makes it so it doesn't mess up the ratio. Let's zoom out and see how big I got this. Okay, let's move this around. I want it to kind of square in a little bit. Again, holding Shift down when I do this. So let's do that. I'm going to hit return, and there we go. Okay, so once I've done that, then you can see that the layer's on top and I can't see myself anymore. I just need to switch the order of these layers right now because whatever's on top is what I can see. So if I drag this entire thing up, there we go. Now be careful when you're doing this. I'm going to undo that. Make sure that you don't drag just your layer mask up, because if you do that, then it's going to do some clipping. It's going to look weird. So you want to keep your layer mask where it's supposed to go and just make sure that you drag the whole thing over here, drag the whole thing up, and now I am in Switzerland. Okay, so that's how you cut people out of backgrounds and put them into new backgrounds. I'm having fun in Switzerland.